Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I'm here today to do a Friday Reads video where I wrap up the week in reading and talk about any exciting bookish things that have gone on this week. If you'd like to skip to the Friday Reads portion of the video, you may do so with the timestamp in the description box down below. There's not a whole lot to talk about before we get to that part, but there will be a lot once we get to the Friday Reads portion of the video because I finished, let me count, 4 books this past week, and I'm feeling very smug and very accomplished about that. So, yay me. And again, we'll talk about all of them in the portion of the video where we do the Friday Reads. Just a quick note, today, as I'm filming this, Friday, May 16th, May 16th is my dog Jamie's birthday. We lost her 2 years ago. So this would be her 15th birthday, and in honor of her, I am wearing the Jameson shirt that I got from the Jameson Distillery in Dublin. So subtle nod to her, and happy birthday wishes to her as well. Teddy is off on an adventure with Joel. Joel took him for a big walk. It has been surprisingly cold where we live this week. So we've kind of hunkered down inside a lot, but it warmed up a little bit today. So he is kindly taking Teddy on a big walk because I think Teddy was starting to get a little bit bored with the lack of activity. And the other thing to note is that, let me pull up my schedule. The International Booker Prize is going to be announced on Tuesday, May 20th. I am hoping that I will be able to film a reaction that day. It should be fairly doable because the nice thing about prizes like the Booker is that they're announced in the evening UK time, which is around lunchtime for me. So usually it's very doable to do a reaction, and hopefully that will be the same on Tuesday. So I will have a reaction to you. I have a copy of On the Calculation of Volume 1, but I have not read it yet. And at this point, it's unlikely I will be able to read it before they announce the winner. But I would love to hear what you think is going to win. I'm kind of my brain is all over the place with what might win. So I'm not doing an official prediction. The list just seemed to be so strong this year that I feel like I would be happy with a number of different outcomes for the International Booker. But if you have an opinion, let me know in the comment section down below. So that is coming on Tuesday. We have rounded up, well, I didn't round up anything. Joel rounded up the questions for the Q&A. So we need to do 2 videos together, and we haven't quite decided schedule, but we're thinking that we're going to film the Q&A this weekend. There are a lot of questions, so I might spin some of the ones that are more specifically for me into a separate video. A lot of people had Pulitzer questions, for example. So it just depends on how many there actually are. So we might not cover everything in that one video, just to make it not absurdly long. And then whatever we don't finish, we will cover in reading wrap-ups because then Joel will be there. And then he's going to do a pile of possibilities for Pride Month with me this year. So that will probably be the week after, if all goes well. Pray for us. So that is a little bit of what's coming. This has been a big week, another big week. I've had 2 big weeks for posting. Somebody commented just this morning, and I've been so busy that I haven't had a chance to respond, that they've fallen behind on my videos because I keep posting them in the month of May. And I don't blame you. I feel like I'm having trouble keeping up with them. And part of it is that there were timely things like the Pulitzer announcement, and then because I had read the book, I did a Pulitzer deep dive on that book, and those were timely. You had to churn them out pretty quickly, and then the New York Times threw me for a loop by announcing its best books of 2025 so far. That video is going to be linked down below, on top of things that I had already kind of planned, like my book haul revisit for the month of May, which was a very successful book haul revisit, and I'm very happy about that. It will also be down below. And a video I did about helping plan your summer reading, looking at new releases that will be coming out across the summer into the month of September. And you can guess that will also be down below. So yeah, it's just been crazy and busy in the month of May. I've been churning out a whole lot of videos, and I apologize if that has been a lot, but hopefully you've been enjoying them. And I am not feeling burnt out at the moment, but I know it's probably going to be good for me to calm down at some point and go back to maybe 2 or 3 videos a week instead of 4 or 5. So just take a deep breath and one day at a time. So I think that's everything. There's a little bit of what's coming, a little bit of what I have been up to. So let's just jump into the Friday Reads portion of the video. Teddy actually just walked in, so Joel must be around here somewhere. He's lurking on the floor behind me. Let me see if I can. There's Teddy. Hello. What do you think? You want to say hello? Oh, there's that tail. So there's your Teddy fix for the week, just in time for us to get to the Friday Reads portion of the video. So, as I said, I finished 4 books this past week, which is really good for me. I'm feeling very smug and proud. I had mentioned that I was temporarily putting down Gilead just because with the amount of thinking and filming and planning, and that was Pulitzer week, so the deep dive required a lot of thought and time, so I was feeling kind of mentally burnt out. So I put Gilead to the side temporarily, and I am hoping to get back to it for a reread and for a Pulitzer deep dive. But I mentioned that I might try some short books, and the first 2 books that I finished were exactly the 2 that I said I was thinking of getting to next. The first one was The Missing Morning Star and Other Stories by Stacy Shannon Denizotzi. This was a library book, and it was due back on May 15th, so as soon as I finished it, I brought it back to the library, which is why you're seeing a photo up here. It's a collection of short stories about Native life. Specifically, these people are all in or affiliated with the Navajo tribe, and I liked it. I will say the one thing that has been interesting is that in the days since I read it and returned it to the library, the stories have started to fade from my mind already. So this may be one of those transitory good books that you read and enjoy, but somehow don't remember. And that's always a really interesting thing when that happens, because I didn't have a specific complaint about the book. I didn't love it, but it's just kind of bizarre then that I don't really remember too many of the specific stories and what happens in them. But they are stories that deal with characters who are a bit down on their luck and scrabbling. Some of them have experienced loss and heartache and grief, and some of them are struggling to make it. And it is a very well-written story collection, so it does make sense to me that Stacy Shannon Denizotzi was selected for the National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35. That's how this book was put on my radar. So it absolutely makes sense. I think she is definitely a talent to watch. I would be very curious to read another story collection by her in the future, and potentially even a novel, because I think any of these stories could have been expanded into a novel if she had so chosen. So yeah, it's just one of those funny things where I liked the book. I genuinely did. It's just funny that, like, if you asked me to describe the stories, I could give you basics about them and tell you scenes and moments that did stick with me. Like, there was one where a character climbs to the top of a water tower, and that moment has stayed with me. And for some reason, a lot of other details have slipped, and maybe that's just me. I don't know. But that was the first book that I finished this week, and I am glad that I read it and got it back to the library in time. I felt good about that. So that was the first book that I finished. After that was done, so I finished that in one day, by the way. I started and finished that on Saturday, which also felt really good. I needed that sense of accomplishment, starting and finishing something in the same day, and, chef's kiss. It just felt great. And Sunday, I started and finished Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan in one day. If you remember, last week I mentioned that Joel and I had watched the film adaptation of Small Things Like These, which in the United States is on Hulu, and I really liked it. I thought it was a very good adaptation of this novella. It's a tiny little thing. You could dunk it in your coffee. Don't know why you would, as I always say, but you could. And that made me really want to go back and reread the book. And I knew I liked this book. I think over time, this book has grown even more in my estimation. I think I've gone from liking this book a lot to loving it, like full stop, loving it. And I noticed so many more things about it this time, and that's why it's always interesting to go back and reread something sometimes, because you notice a lot of things, just the amount of kindness and empathy that Bill Furlong has that society and the world and other people around him are trying to crush out of him. In my memory, it had only really come out when he went to the convent and found the thing he finds. Basically, this is a story about Bill Furlong in 1985. He owns a coal company. So because everybody's busy, he will go out and do the deliveries during this season. And while he is making a delivery to a convent, he discovers something, and he doesn't know what to do about that something that he discovers. And a lot of people advise him to do nothing, because the convent is obviously associated with the church, and that is extremely powerful in this town. And if he does try to do something, it could cause him and his family a great deal of harm and difficulty. So he's struggling with that. But throughout the book, there are other things where he wants to care for other people, wants to do the right thing, and feels sad that the world would tell him not to, or that it's kind of shameful, or that, he gives his spare change to a young boy who was out looking for sticks. And his wife makes a joke about him always giving his change away. And it's, especially as a Christmas story, it's interesting as well, because although you can read this at any time of the year, clearly it's May and I read it now. It has that sense of, Christmas time, a time for giving and what's actually important. And I just really love this book. And all the small details, like Claire Keegan writes with such precision, because this is a tiny book and she really makes a big impact with the characters, with the story. And one of the things I noticed is just how she manages to use her writing to convey so much. Just the fact that the phrase small things comes up at odd moments in the book and points to a whole lot of different things, like small kindnesses, small things that you could do for other people. But also there was a very interesting example. I'm trying to see if I can find it where he is. Yes, here it is, page 10. Sometimes Furlong, seeing the girls going through the small things which needed to be done, genuflecting in the chapel or thanking a shopkeeper for the change, felt a deep private joy that these children were his own. That even points to small things that you do to show honor or respect for other people, because both of those examples, like genuflecting or thanking a shopkeeper for the change, that last one in particular, the thanking a shopkeeper for the change, was something we really tried to teach our foster son, because he didn't like to say thank you to people, and specifically waitresses or waiters. He would say, well, that's their job, I shouldn't have to say thank you. And it's like, no, but it's just a kind thing to do. And Bill Furlong has that sensibility of, so gosh, I love this book. It is absolutely fantastic. 5 stars all the way. I'm so glad I reread it. And it makes me think I should reread it more. This, especially since it's a short book, this might be something to read every year, for me at least, because I just absolutely, absolutely love it. So once I finished those 2 short books, again, I finished The Missing Morning Star on Saturday. I finished Small Things Like These on Sunday. Those were one and done books. And again, I really needed that boost, and it worked really well. I also mentioned in a recent Friday Reads video that I had watched the movie Captains Courageous from 1937, I believe, with Spencer Tracy. And I didn't have very high expectations going into it, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was really great. So, spoiler for my book haul for the month of May, I had found a copy of Captains Courageous by Rudyard Kipling in my local used bookstore. And once I finished those 2 books, I figured, why don't I just keep going with the short thing and try this since the movie's still fresh in mind. And this one was not as successful. It took me, despite how short it is, I kind of struggled to get into it. It took me about 2 or 3 days to even get to the point where I consider it something I'm reading. Because if you have followed along at all, you know I don't really count something as a book that I am reading unless I get 50 pages in. And if I'm listening to an audio, I've sort of arbitrarily decided that 15% of an audio, I can say that I am reading that book. So it took me a couple of days even just to get to the point where I was 50 pages in. This is where I start to wonder. I've been on this incredible run in 2025. I have read nothing but good books. And I didn't enjoy reading Captain's Courageous. And in parts, I found it tedious, if I'm being very honest. So I keep wondering to myself, did I read my first bad book of 2025? It's actually a trickier question than you might think, because yes, I didn't really enjoy reading this book. Yes, I found parts of it tedious. But I think part of the difficulty is that the book is very different from the movie. And I went in expecting the movie, and this is just not that story. It has like the basic framework, but the movie crafts a whole narrative that drives the story forward and makes the story better. This to me is an example of one of those cases where the movie is better than the book. So the premise of this is that you have this very spoiled rich kid named Harvey Chain who is described as a terror in the book. In the movie, you actually get to see a lot more instances of him being a terror and a spoiled brat and a terrible person who doesn't really care about the other people around him or how his actions might impact other people. He ends up on a steamer ship. In the movie, he's on this boat with his father, and his mother has passed away at some point, and his father is distant because of his job and perhaps some grief over losing the mother. In the book, the mother's alive, and the father's not even around in the beginning of the story. He's on the steamer ship with his mother, and he accidentally falls overboard. And he is rescued from the ocean by a fisherman named Manuel. That's the part Spencer Tracy plays in the movie. And Manuel takes him to the fishing vessel that he is on. It's called the We're Here. In the book, basically, he argues for a little bit with the captain about how he wants to be returned to New York immediately and how his rich father will make it worth the captain's while. And in the course of the argument, he insults the captain several times to the point where the captain finally slaps him, which behavior I don't quite approve of. Different time. But anyway, and immediately after that, he just wakes up and he's like, oh, you're right. I should be respectful. And it doesn't really make sense in the book. In the movie, there's a lot more of a process in him coming around and seeing the value of doing work on the ship. In the book, he just starts doing it. And in the movie, it's Manuel who really teaches him the process of being a fisherman, what it's like, what the life is like, the sense of honor and ethics that they all live by, and teaches him about being a good man and is the sort of father figure. Manuel's barely in the book. And the ending is completely different, by the way. It's Dan, the younger boy on the ship, who becomes like a brother to him, and he teaches him all about it. And the details of what they do on the ship, how the ship operates, how a fishing vessel, like the process of the fishing and what you do with the fish and how you keep the boat clean and the watch shifts in the night is all detailed at great length for such a short book. And this is a thing that really convinces me that I should never read Moby Dick, because one thing I hear a lot is that it is very specific and detailed about whaling ships and what goes on them, how the boat operates, and all of that stuff. And if I couldn't really handle it in a book this tiny, It's about 144 pages, I think. Yeah, 144 pages. I couldn't handle it in a book the size of Moby Dick. So it affirmed for me that that is probably not a book that I will ever read. There's not so much story in this. The movie kind of grafts a narrative that's really interesting and sentimental and sweet about father and son dynamics and relationships and honor, and it's not really there in the book. So that's where I'm stuck because, again, I didn't really enjoy the experience of reading Captain's Courageous. I thought parts of it were tedious, and I fully admit that in parts where it was really getting into the nitty-gritty of describing what they were doing, step by step, process by process, all the way through, like cleaning the fish or loading the dock, I would skip a couple of pages because it would go on for pages about that one thing. And there might be a little banter between the people who are participating in this task, but it's really just telling you what they're doing. And I did not quite get along with that. So I'm stuck. Is this the first bad book I read? I don't think it is inherently a bad book. I think I really wanted the movie. And I think the movie's better. So it's easy to then say, I read my first bad book of the year. But as I said, I don't think it's inherently a bad book. Like if you have liked Moby Dick and didn't mind all of the descriptions of sailing and all that, you might like Captain's Courageous. So I think I need to sit with this a little more to decide if I did read my first bad book of 2025. I knew it was going to happen eventually. It just remains to be seen if I just had a sort of visceral knee-jerk opposition reaction to Captain's Courageous because it was so unlike the movie. And I had really wanted that because I enjoyed the movie much more than I thought I would. So I need to marinate on this a little bit and see where I end up. But I think as I'm talking about it, I am kind of talking myself into it because anytime you describe a book as tedious, it's probably not a good thing. So that's where we are. So I actually finished this last night. I started it on Monday. I think I only got about 50 pages in on Wednesday, possibly even Thursday, and just tore through the last part. As I said, I skipped chunks when it was getting very granular about what was going on in the book. So I feel like I'm talking myself into thinking that I read my first bad book of the year. However, I do think it's kind of unfair to call this a bad book. It's not a bad book. It wasn't what I expected, and maybe it's just not for me. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. So there you go. The streak most likely has ended. And then I had been listening to the audio of The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. I believe I had talked about this in my last Friday Reads video because I can't remember how far into it I had gotten. And for the whole first half of the book, I really didn't know where it was going to go. It's an epistolary novel. You have a character named Sybil Stone Van Antwerp who obviously really likes to write letters. She's very old-fashioned in that way, and she feels better able to express herself and maintain relationships through letters, handwritten letters. There are emails in the book as well, but she doesn't like email as much. And she feels that it's much more personal to communicate with people through the mail. So in the first half, it sets up a lot of different storylines through these letters. You have the letters that she sends and the letters that she receives back. Not all of them, and that was something that was a little tricky for me because occasionally you'll start thinking, time passes. The book starts, I believe, in 2012 and ends in it spans about 10 years. Sometimes there's a large gap in the communication between her and somebody else because it starts going through the other storylines that are going on. And then you sort of get back to one and she'll send a letter. And sometimes there will just be an excuse like, oh, I'm sorry, it's been so long since I've communicated. This was going on or something like that. And sometimes it's just a lot of time has passed and it doesn't quite it's one of those things where I almost question the amount of time that passes in the book because it seems like the back and forth would make much more sense if it happened more quickly. But also there are sometimes references to the notion that there have been other letters in between. They just haven't been shown to you. So Sybil Van Antwerp is a very prickly woman, very stern and strict, traditional. She had a great legal career. She was a lawyer at a time when women weren't really allowed to be lawyers, and kind of in the same era as Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And women certainly weren't judges. So her colleague gets appointed as a judge, and she clerks for him. And some people see that as a step down. She does not. She sees it as a great career that she's very proud of. And she has a very complicated family dynamic. You know, I love a complicated family story. She is estranged from her daughter. She's divorced from her husband, who now lives in Europe. And they lost one son when he was a child in an accident. And she writes letters to a work colleague's son, who's a teenager who is troubled, kind of coded as neurodivergent, although there's never a diagnosis for it. And she's actually a great resource for him, like writing to her. She's able to tell him things that she can't tell anybody else. He is able to tell her things that he can't tell anybody else. And she has this whole thing where she was adopted and someone gives her a gift to one of those, you know, it's not 23andMe, but it's coded as 23andMe. And she keeps writing back and forth with customer service and develops a relationship with the customer service person from there. So, and then she gets threatening letters as well that relate to a case that she had worked on in the past, someone who was unhappy with the way it went. So by the middle of the book, you have all of these threads, and it's kind of like, I genuinely don't know how this is going to tie up, how this is going, where all of these storylines are going to go. I have no idea. And it goes in some surprising directions, and I found that it ties everything together in a very sweet way, and I really appreciated it. The end did make me cry. I think it made me cry twice, actually. Certainly I missed it up twice. And I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was a lot of fun. I listened to it on audio, as I said, and I think that was the right way to go. Because I had the library book last week, I returned it with The Missing Morning Star because I was doing this on audio. And our commenter, Kurt Anderson, had just read it, and I kind of asked him, like, I'm debating. I have the library book, but I also have access to the audio, and he said he did it by audio and loved it, and I would actually recommend the audio because they have a cast of characters doing the voices, and that sort of brings the story to life. Although before I returned the book to the library, I did sort of flip through, and occasionally there are times when in the book she crosses out a section of letters. There's also letters that are written to someone you don't necessarily know who they're going to. And those are the ones that sometimes she'll cross out and rewrite something. And that doesn't necessarily come across in the audio. But knowing that, when I heard those sections, I really appreciated the way the audiobook narrator handled those moments, because it makes sense. The only thing is, if you were just listening to the audio, you wouldn't know that there was something stylistically different about the way that was done. But I thought the audio was fantastic, and I would highly recommend this book. I really enjoyed it a great deal. And I, poor Joel, when I finished, I told him the entire book and because I just had to talk about it. And that's how much I liked The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. It was just good fun. And I finished that last night too. So after working on both books throughout the week, I ended up finishing Captain's Courageous and The Correspondent in the same evening. And that was last night as I'm filming this. So that was Thursday. Now it's Friday. And I have already started my next two books. Before bed, I started the audio of Once Upon a Tome, The Misadventures of a Rare Bookseller by Oliver Darkshire. This is something I had been thinking about doing for Pride Month because Oliver Darkshire is married to a man. So the book itself is not classified as LGBTQIA, but he is a queer author. So through that, I was thinking I would put it on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month. I ended up doing it now because I had put a hold on the audio and it came available. And I thought, I just really want to do that now. So that's what I'm doing. Even though I have the book, I got this when Joel and I were in Seattle. And I am 19% of the way. I didn't get very far last night because I was tired. And I got through a fairly good chunk of the book this morning, to the point where I'm about 19 or 20% into it. And it's very charming. And the chapters are very short. And Oliver Darkshire reads the audio, and he has a great voice for audio. So obviously, The Misadventures of a Rare Bookseller tells you what this is. It's a nonfiction. He gets hired at a rare antiquarian used bookstore called Sutherland's in the UK as an apprentice when he is young, and he has made a career there. He is most noted, there's sort of an introduction by one of his coworkers. It mentions that they had a Twitter account back when it was actually Twitter. They quietly didn't use it very much. They just, like, in order to keep up appearance, would occasionally post something, but there would be long stretches where they just didn't use it at all. And then randomly, they found out that Oliver had taken over their Twitter account and had grown it from 11 subscribers to 1,000. And then at the point that he was writing the foreword or introduction to this, they were up to 40,000 followers. And a good part of that is that Oliver has this really great sense of humor and a great wit. And again, that comes across really well in his narration. So I'm actually glad that I am doing this on audio, although the book itself is really gorgeous. And it has French flaps. I love paperbacks with French flaps. I know they're not for everybody. There is Oliver Darkshire, by the way. So in the part of the book where I am, he's still new to the world of rare book selling, and he's sort of explaining it as he is learning about it as an apprentice in this store. And it's really fascinating. I feel like in another life, I would love to work with antiquarian books and rare books and all of that stuff, but that would be another life. But it is fascinating to me, and I'm really enjoying reading it, and I look forward to finishing it and taking in everything he has to say. He also is actually just releasing a novel. It's called Isabella Nag and the Basil Pot, something like that. It's supposed to be a cozy fantasy-ish book like Legends and Lattes, and I'm blanking on Bookshops and Bone Dust. That's the name of the sequel. And reading this, I can see where he has a style and a tone that would really fit with something like that. So I'm actually curious about that book now as well. And then this morning, I ended up jumping into something else that I had been telling myself I was going to save for Pride Month. The Stand-In Dad by Alex Summers. This is something that I reached out to the publisher, Avon, and they sent me this copy of it. I believe it doesn't actually come out until May 27th. However, it does look like the audio is actually available on Libro. But I started this in print, and it was compared to Matt Cain and Ryan Love. I haven't really, particularly Matt Cain, I've really enjoyed. And now that I've started it, I am 38 pages in, and the comparison really fits. It really works. It does definitely give me Matt Cain vibes. So if you have liked The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle or Becoming Ted as much as Joel and I have, this would be a really great book for you. And I just couldn't wait until June. So maybe what I'm doing here is just kicking off Pride reading a little bit early. And the premise here, you can kind of guess from the title, but you have David, who owns a flower shop in the UK. And one day, he looks out the window and sees Meg crying outside his store. He invites her in, and it turns out Meg is engaged to marry her girlfriend, Hannah. And her parents, they were actually supposed to go to his flower shop and start planning for her wedding. But her parents no-showed on her. They are really not handling her being a lesbian well at all. So faced with the prospect of planning, because her partner Hannah is traveling a lot for work, she's basically faced with the notion that she's going to have to plan this entire wedding on her own. She's devastated that her parents aren't there. So they sit and they talk, and David, who was rejected by his own parents when he came out of the closet, offers to go along with all of to all of these events. Like he's going to go to a cake tasting with her, wedding dress shopping, and all of those things, and sort of be a stand-in dad. And it's so far very sweet, and I'm really enjoying it. It's like the nice, heartwarming style of book that I really felt like I needed right now, even without necessarily knowing it. So I'm so glad I didn't wait until June to start this, and I can't wait to finish this one either. I don't know what my next book will be in audio or in print once I finish those. I still have a little bit of time before I have to make any hard and fast decisions. Maybe I'll go back to Gilead. Maybe I need a little more time with some fun, interesting books, and we'll see. We will see when I am done. So that's what I've been up to this week. I would love to hear what you've been up to, what you've been reading, loving, watching, all of that stuff. Let me know in the comment section. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.